Good day to you. I want to bring you a little talk, the sociology, politics, economics of the Christmas times. But I want to begin with a little update on the COVID issue. The Omicron new variant was discovered and they expected that it could be very serious, but thankfully up to now what's reported is that it's a variant of mild infection, and the scientists and the clinicians held together in South Africa and they presented the case that when their good science discovered this variant, that they should not be punished. So that was held. We are thankful for that. So that's how that was. So getting to these times that we are in, the last month of the year, and we know it's a month often with many events. Here is the beginning of it. Now in those days, this is from the Gospel according to Luke, the document according to Luke. Luke was a medical doctor. So medical doctors those days were also the record keepers, family document keepers. So they were trusted, they were learned. So Luke was a Greek and he was serving a Roman nobleman. So what eventuated this was that the Roman nobleman told Luke to go and investigate in Palestine the story that was happening about someone who was called the Prince of Peace. So, and that it was spreading. How was that someone born in nowhere, unknown, born to poor lineage, born in a vassal country? Romans were the power. How can he have such a massive influence? Was what this Roman noble was thinking about. And Luke being an investigator, being a diagnostician, he trusted Luke's sense of investigation to go look and report. So that's what Luke did. He came out to Palestine and investigated from the very beginning as a proper one who keeps documents, historical analysis. So he examined or interviewed everyone who was alive at the time. Luke would have come to Palestine around about maybe 50 AD or maybe about 50 AD. It would have been about 17 years or 20 years, let's say 43 AD or 50 years. It's about 17 years since the death of the Prince of Peace that Luke came and interviewed everyone who was available for an interview. So he documented from the very beginning. So he put the beginning down as this. So Luke was meant to be a trusted historian. And when Lew Wallace when Lew Wallace, the army man, went into Palestine, he took the story of Luke and he was a meta archaeologist also, and he began as an atheist. He's the author of Ben-Hur. The famous film Ben-Hur was based on his historical novel. He found all what Luke said about this archaeological references, historical references, very true. So eventually while doing his research on the historicity of the story, he also began to believe the story. That is about Lew Wallace, Captain Lew Wallace, who wrote the Ben-Hur story, which of course became a famous production. It became a famous production. So now in those days, Luke's document, chapter 2, now in those days a decree went from Caesar Augustus that a census be taken of all the inhabited earth. So he was Caesar of that time. So Luke is writing a historical document open for investigation. That's how it is. This was the first census taken while Quirinius was the governor of Syria. So all the historical context is given. And we can examine this, do a research on this. We can't do it on a short talk like this, but it was proved to be true. And when Captain Lew Wallace, the author of Ben-Hur, investigated the story, he found this to be true. So everyone was on his way to register for the census, each to his own city. a census would be taken to number the citizens, then of course tax would follow. And Palestine was a vassal nation ruled by Romans at that time with the Roman fist, so to say. And Palestine was known to be a difficult place to rule because Jews don't easily submit. Many rebellions have been there. So they always sent their toughest governors to rule Palestine. That's how it went. So everyone was on his way to register for the census, each to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family of David. So now comes the story. It is not, it looks a very easy thing that Joseph had to go from Nazareth to Bethlehem. What's the sociology behind this? What's the history behind this? Bethlehem was a royal city when David was the best king of Israel. And Bethlehem had the best wheat, best grass, best water, best lambs, best linen. So Bethlehem had a great linen industry. Bethlehem had a great linen industry, and the linen was woven on the handloom machines. Handloom machines needed excellent carpenters. So carpenters of Bethlehem were very well paid, well known, held in high esteem. And Bethlehem was also on the border of Israel, bordering the Philistine country, and there was war all the time. So people of Bethlehem were known to be valiant warriors as well, valiant soldiers. But in time, Bethlehem went down because Jerusalem became a royal city, and even later than that, other cities of trade arose in Palestine, such as Jericho and cities of Galilee. And in Nazareth, Joseph's family went down in life, and he was found in Nazareth, somewhat of a busy metropolis, serving as a carpenter. And those cities around the Sea of Galilee had thriving fishing communities, and the fishermen owned the boats and they were rich. So Simon Peter was a rich fisherman, for instance. So the carpenters were the serving class, the servant class, and they just earned very meager supplies, so to say. Their earnings were meager. So that's the way it was with Joseph. He had gone down, his family has gone down in life. Now, if you have been down in life and you have to go to take a sad journey or down the memory lane for what it was, how good it was, you know it was a very difficult time to go through the memory lane from where you are down in the doldrums, so to say, sociologically down, economically down, in the esteem of other people down. That was what Joseph was, and he had to go back to Bethlehem, to his origins and roots. To add to that, his betrothed one, Mary, was also pregnant, and they were extremely poor. So he had to go back to his relatives, his own country, and he had to give an explanation of all this. So he was not looking forward to the journey, so to say. But then, God is always on the side of the oppressed. God is on the side of the underprivileged. So let's see how the story unveils. He was of the house of David and family of David. So they come to register along with Mary, who was about to give birth. The days were completed for her to give birth. So it happened that night, birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloth, laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. So every inn has a stable yard, and this inn was known as Chinham's Inn, and it's archaeologically, historically known, this famous inn of Bethlehem. It's archaeologically and historically known because Bethlehem was sited on an old highway between Syria and Egypt, where there was much traffic. So this inn always had people moving around, and behind an inn in those days would be the stable yard, because people will be traveling with donkeys, with horses, and sheep. Shepherds were always a factor in Bethlehem because there was much pasture land and a lot of sheep and lambs. So this was the time also lambs would be born. So lambs were wrapped in cloth so that they do not lose heat. Similarly, the baby born was also wrapped in cloth, but they only had a stable yard to keep their baby. So in traditional times there are, you make a cave kind of thing, and that may be true because in the stable yard of Bethlehem there were caves. So this was called Chinham's Inn, and this bit of property to build this inn came from King David himself. That's a historical story, because King David's one son Absalom rebelled against the father and came against the father with an army. Father being a God-fearing man, he did not want bloodshed, though he could have easily defeated his son. He left Jerusalem, and later, anyway, Absalom suffered defeat, and there was a gentleman called Barzillai who helped David, and David, as in gratitude, gave him a bit of land that he owned in Bethlehem. In those days, kings did not own much land. They were just ordinary people who were one amongst others. So the qualification, David was the eighth in a family. David the king was eighth in a family, and he was born of another mother. His father, David's father, was a famous man in Bethlehem. This story is set in, this time I'm backtracking to 1010 BC, and when David became king, which means David would have been born in 1040 BC. His father was a famous man, Jospeh, the best known man in the city of Bethlehem, but he had this thing that his eighth son was born of another woman, a war widow. And then David has 7 brothers who served the king in the king's place, and they were the favored ones, and David was the last one, embarrassment to the father. Father is 80 years old and little David is sort of 12 years old kind of situation. So that was the situation. So when Samuel came looking to anoint, Samuel the prophet came looking to anoint the next king, the father Jesse never brought David into the picture. There were 7 sons, very stately looking, well built and all that, and when the 7 sons were brought, Samuel said, none of them. Is there another son? Then Jesse scratched his head and said, yes, there's another son, I'll call him. And David came. He was 17 years old at that time, and then he was anointed or chosen, elected to be the commission to be the next king. And at that time, the king had gone wrong. King long in power goes wrong. And then king got a devil into him, and they were looking for someone to remove this angry spirit out of the king. And David did 2 things. He took aim with a catapult, a slingshot, and he played his harp all the time. That's how he kept himself going. And so David was brought to the king's court to play the harp so that the king may go to sleep and improve his anger. So that's an old story. So this was the city of Bethlehem, how it became famous. Now it is famous for the first Christmas night, Bethlehem. Everybody knows about Bethlehem. If you go to Israel today, Bethlehem is a Palestinian city. They celebrate Christmas very grandly. So they are poor people, but they still have Christmas for them. They build a very, very big Christmas tree in Bethlehem even today. So we get back to the story of Joseph, who had to retrace his steps back to Bethlehem, because Bethlehem has now they were in Nazareth. They were carpenters, and in Nazareth rich people were the fishermen, and they were in the sidewalks of Nazareth. They were not famous people, but the story made them famous. Why did the story make them famous? When God was looking to come into the world, they found this very humble couple. One was Joseph, who was only betrothed. Mary was betrothed to Joseph and said, I have chosen you. They were very surprised because they were nobodies. So God works with nobodies to do something great. Remember that principle. Never call yourself a nobody. And in this story we find Mary had fears that she will not be adequate for the task. Joseph had fears that people will misunderstand, that there will be shame coming upon other people's stories. Then there was another gentleman called Zacharias who was involved in the story. he thought he will be disappointed. Then there were shepherds. God chose the lowliest in the social run. Shepherds are nobodies. Their testimony was not taken in any court of law, because they were migrant people. They go from place to place. They steal the things of other people. So they were into a lot of racket. But God chose them. So when the message came to them, they were surprised. They didn't expect such an important thing would be told to them. They never expected that important things would be ever told to them. So you can see that God works in mysterious ways His wonders to perform. That's the old saying, God works in mysterious ways His wonders to perform. So that night, God chose the shepherds to first tell the story. And this baby was wrapped in the manger, in the stable yard. Manger is a place where you hang or fill the trough with animal food. So when the shepherds were told there's a baby in the manger, now we have many songs about the manger, but manger was a dirty place those days. Animal food, tetanus bacterium, dung, horse dung, cow dung, goat dung, it was a dirty place. But God of glory came to that dirty place. That's the way the Christmas story is, and we know it's a true story because now years are counted from before the birth of Christ and after the birth of Christ. So this virtual social outcast, shepherds heard this wonderful story. And it says, angel of the Lord, in the same region, there were some shepherds staying out in the in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. I have an entire book on this, little booklet. If you want to have it, you can please send me with your address the WhatsApp number plus 94 76 or 076 313 4800. I am Dr. Lalith Mendis. I also have an app, Golden Nuggets. You can download it free of charge from Google or Apple Store. These stories are of particular interest to me because till my days of just getting into the medical faculty, I did not believe any of these things were true, because my home was from an atheistic background. So just like my father, I thought so, and science made me so. Theory of evolution is what we believed. But that year, just before getting into the medical faculty, I had become first in the island in what we call the advanced level examination, with my subjects chemistry, physics, botany and zoo, and St. Thomas's College was my school that had produced 5 prime ministers of Sri Lanka. And so my head was very bloated anyway, and after my first in the island result, my head was bloated some more. But during that time, I got involved with an argument and began to examine these stories. And the stories convinced me of its historicity, accuracy. I examined the archaeology, I examined the polemics, I examined the science, and I was convinced, just like Lew Wallace, that this was a true story. Lew Wallace was the author of the book Ben-Hur. Please take the book Ben-Hur and have a look. You can even watch the film Ben-Hur. It's quite moving story. So I qualified in my Colombo medical faculty. I became batched up in every exam in the faculty. While what I found was, while my head grew big, my heart was shrinking. That's the time at which I had this change, and it made my heart feel for people. Otherwise, we researchers don't care for people. We only care for data. We only care for knowledge and fact. More facts, more research. That is our bread and butter. But that change came into me, and my story changed. So this story is quite close to my heart, and this is about shepherds. The lowest in the rung got the message. But there was another thing that happened. The wise men, the Greek is magi, which means they were probably coming from Persia. came also to see this baby, saying they have seen a certain sign. Now, these wise men from Persia also had the documents or what a prophet called Daniel had given. He was quite a big shot in Persia. He was a Jew, but he had gone to Persia and he arose in the administration. He was the highest administrator in that country, and he had given a document saying at such and such a time there would come a Messiah to Jerusalem. So they kept record of the time and they came looking. They were rich people who brought gold, frankincense and myrrh. That's how the Christmas story is made up. In actual fact, they didn't come on the same night the child was born, though nativity shows, we put all things together. That's okay, that's just for drama. But they came a little later. By that time the baby was in a house. But that night it was the shepherds who came, and they brought great news, because they were told by the angels, unto you this day is born a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. Now when Jews are told Christ the Lord, it means he is the supreme God who is now come as a baby. That's not in their theology. Now thankfully shepherds did not go to synagogue or anywhere. They were godless people, but they believed this, because they saw and believed, and they later came and witnessed the baby in the manger. So there are a lot of songs, Christmas songs about baby away in a manger. Yes, that's the historical context. Baby wrapped in cloth and lying in a manger. And then the angels gave the Christmas message. This is how they gave it: glory to God in the highest. Just listen to this: glory to God in the highest, and among men on whom God's favor rests will be peace. So there are three components. Whatever it is, God's glory is higher than anybody else, whoever says what. And then there are to be people who will carry the favor of God, and then through them God sends his peace. This is God's plan to bring peace for every nation. Then in this context we have an older book, chap called Isaiah. He lived in 700 BC. So when I get 740 BC, when I give dates, all these are historically verifiable. All you have to do is do the research. I have a book with all this research done. If you send me your WhatsApp number to my WhatsApp 076313480, I can send you the document or the book. Yes, so this is the story from Isaiah's point of view. This is how Isaiah records it in 740 BC as he sees the story. He records it like this: they will pass through the land hard pressed and famished, and it will turn out when they are hungry, they will be enraged and curse their king. This is what people do when they are hungry, and their God as they face upward. In trouble, they curse the king, they curse God. That's human nature. Then they will look to the earth and behold distress, darkness, gloom of anguish, just like COVID, isn't it? And they will be driven away into darkness. So people get even worse when they start cursing. That is what cursing is. If you say thank you for what you have, situation improves. When you curse, you diminish. When you are blaming others, you diminish. But there will be no more gloom. Then a message of hope is given. No more gloom for her who was in anguish. In earlier times, he treated the northern land of Israel with contempt, but it will become glorious by the way of the sea on the other side of Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. There will be a great light. So we know though Christ was born in Bethlehem, he began to minister in the area of Galilee, northern Galilee. That was a depressed area, full of other nations. So Jews did not like that area. That was considered a bad area, a God-forsaken area. But actually there are no God-forsaken areas. So later when it was known that Messiah came from Galilee, they said, can anything good come out of Galilee? The people in Galilee had even a worse idea about Nazareth. And they said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Yes, good came out. People who walk in darkness will see a great light. Who live in a dark land, the light will shine on them. So this was the birth. So why would that be? Because a child will be born, a son will be given, government will be on his shoulder. So he's coming with a government, but it's a spiritual government into the hearts of the people. This was my experience when I began to exchange, when I began to investigate. Though my brain was going brilliant, my heart was shrinking hard, not concerned for people. But then, wonderful Counselor, that's how the baby was introduced. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. What we find is you can personally know him. Thank you for listening. Please send a WhatsApp if you need any more documents on this. I can send you by post or by email. Thank you for listening.